of what happens to our future. The majority choose. In America, democracy is actually a civil right. You have the right to vote. In Australia, we don't have any civil rights. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. We have no civil rights here. We have no enforceable rights. What we do have, though, under our Constitution, is an entitlement to vote. Our Chief Justice Murray Gleeson one day, at a Boyer lecture, made it clear that right or that entitlement we have to vote must be made by the free will of an informed electorate. Now, I don't know how many people here think that we have a democratic process that works that way, but I don't. In the beginning of democracy, or the beginning of Australia, you'd be standing around in your local township and there'd be someone like me standing up here and three more ready to get up, and they would be your candidates. You'd know who they were, you'd know what they stand for, and you would be able to choose the right person to represent you, the electorate. That's how politics started. We now have a two-party system called two-party politics, and that's actually preferred only by the two parties, because it empowers them. It doesn't empower the people that it should do.
That's right.
You are enforced to vote. You are enforced to attend to vote. You are forced to preference every player, and then they use that system to ensure that the Labor and Liberal Party maintain power in this country, rather than doing what they should do, and that is actually looking after you, the people of Australia. The problem we have in this world is that there's a few things. First of all, we go to war for democracy. How can you go to war for democracy? The only people that can enforce democracy is us. By us standing up and saying, we want our vote, we want to know who's running, we want to know what you are going to promise us, and then we expect you to come through with that. You start to think, what sort of world would we live in if we didn't have a democracy? What sort of world would it become? All right, so let's imagine we don't have a democracy. A great American once said, when the government fear the people, there's democracy. But when the people fear the government, there's tyranny. So let's imagine that we didn't have democracy. What might happen?
Socialism.
Well, I actually had notes. I'm not doing very good with notes. The sort of things that would happen is you might get your leader stand up and say, there will be no carbon tax under the government I lead, and then backpedal, because they do not fear you anymore. They don't fear accountability because they don't have a good system of democracy. You might have Obama stand up and say, we will have all the troops back home by 2010. Did they? No. The problem we have is that we continue as a people and as a country to reward lies and incompetence. So that is what's brought us here today. The reason we are here to ask to repeal this carbon tax is simply because we didn't have the honour that these people behind us should be giving us. If someone makes a promise to you, they should honour it. They are called honourable. The Honourable Julia Gillard. Who here thinks she's honourable?
Where's my skeleton?
I'll get on to climate change, and I'll get on to the carbon tax, but I'd just like to tell you a couple of things that go on in Australia that the general media don't cover, and you'd all be aware of the fact that the media aren't particularly here to inform us anymore. They're here to do what they're told. It appears that way. In every state, and I won't list all the stuff here, but in every state, every year, lots of dodgy practices go on. I'd like to talk a little bit about that because I think it is important. Hundreds of thousands of votes every federal election, the ballot papers go missing. Hundreds of thousands of people turn up to vote and their name's no longer on the roll. Did you know that?
Yes.
Also, the Labor Party and the Liberal Party got together and they send out postal ballot applications to you. They send them out, but when you return them, it goes back to their offices. So in South Australia, I think around 17 or 18,000 ballot papers went missing at the last state election. 7,500 of those were found to be dodgy. Now, that doesn't sound too bad so far, But the Labor Party in South Australia, just to give you an indication of what goes on in every state, what they did was they registered the opposition leader's name as a reply paid address. So when you received something from a party you supported and you sent back your postal ballot, it actually went to the opposition party. In other words, you thought you were sending it back to the Liberal Party, but it actually went to the Labor Party and they destroyed those ballot papers. That's how they rig elections. And not many people know that, and I won't go on about that anymore, but those sorts of things are particularly very important. So when you go to vote and they hand you that really advanced democratic piece of paper and give you a pencil, and you see them armed with rubbers, start to be concerned as to what's really happening to your vote, because that's how we get to a place where we are now. When the government no longer fear us, they can get away with bullshitting to us. Now, I won't talk a lot about carbon tax. We've got some great speakers today, and carbon tax is a very important issue. But I'd like to tell you this. The carbon tax started with a lie. The carbon tax has continued to be a lie, and all we are going to be fed for the next 2 years is lies upon lies upon lies. Now, I stand here in front of you. I consider myself a staunch environmentalist, but I get labelled a denier. I get labelled, because of my stand, I get labelled as someone that doesn't care for the environment. The carbon tax is not about the environment. It's about money. It's about not sharing that money equally, and it's about sending that money overseas to people we should not be trusting with our money. Let's look at some of the lies. First, it was global warming. Then it stopped warming. So then it was climate change. We'll probably hear another 5 or 6 different spins on that.
Extreme weather.
Actually, I'm a bit worried about the climate myself, because this morning it was quite cold and now I'm hot. It must be warming. The Earth was to warm. Last year the Earth was to warm 5 degrees in 20 years. Now it's going to warm 1 degree in 100 years. But the IPC reports, which the government rely on, say that we can't change the weather for at least 150 years because of the timelines associated with it. So even if we could cut back carbon and it would change the weather, it's going to be 150 years' time before that 1 degree changes. So yes, we're in a big hurry to introduce a new tax. Australia's 2020 Copenhagen commitment is to an unconditional emissions reduction target. That means that if Gillard hadn't lied to us and we'd end up with a Liberal government, it's highly likely that they would have had to do the same thing. It may have changed the name, but what they didn't do is ask us what we want. Now, I just thought I'd just chuck in a little bit of the spin, because they use the word spin these days instead of... Oh, sorry, I said bullshit before. Sorry about that. They use the word spin now instead of lie because it sounds more appropriate. So let's look at the PCC, and see if there's any spin there. The IPCC chairman, Robert Watson, said the mistakes in the final drafts all appear to go in the direction of making climate change appear more serious by overstating the impact. Keith Shine, one of the lead authors, also concurred. We produce a draft, we produce a policy, and then the policymakers go through it line by line and change what's presented. So we are being conned not only at every level of the game, but even the IPCC themselves, the people that wrote the reports, do not believe the contents of them.
Except Julia.
Well, then there was the sell was we're only going to tax the top 1,000 polluters. Then it was the top 500 polluters, and now it's less than 500 polluters.
Who are they? Yeah, who are they? We want to know who they are.
I thought we just... I better finish soon. I've been here too long already, I'm sure of it. Here's some of the figures that we've been quoted in the last 2 months or 3 months. 10% of any monies raised by the carbon tax goes to the UN. I know most people here would know that. Over 60% is going to be handed back to us, the people, because some of these polluters might hand on the cost to us. Then 60% is going to be spent overseas on emission abatement. Start adding it up, 10%, 60%, 60%. Then we need the creation of a Clean Energy Finance Corporation, a Clean Energy Regulator, an Australian Renewable Energy Agency, and a Climate Change Authority, which we've been told will have billions to spend. So the 16 billion so far that they're going to raise in the first year, they're already spending about 45. Then we have the problem that the tax comes in at $23 a tonne. Now, if anyone's read the government's own reports, and I'm giving you figures from the government's own reports, is Australia's been paying $44 a tonne for the last few years, and we've been doing quite a good job on the environmental side. So now we're going to pay less, supposedly, and do more, even though we're giving the money away overseas, which makes just simply no sense at all. But then we've got the big banks that want to come in and make some money out of it. We've got the private trading companies. We've got the small businesses that are already suffering with the stupid red tape coming out of this house behind us. Now they've got the green tape to worry about. I mean, basically what we're doing is destroying our country, giving up on the environment. And if we were particularly worried about the environment, issues like solar rebates, which are now being dropped, would be continued or improved. LPG rebates, they're dropping those. Feedback schemes, they're dropping those. They never applied those solar rebates. They never applied any of those LPG rebates to small business or to big business. It was only to the people. All of those are gone now. So all those environmentalists out there standing in the background or listening and saying, look at those idiots up there, the carbon tax is going to save the environment. They're obviously not bloody watching, are they?
No.
I'll finish on this. We'll just look at a couple of figures. We're about to follow a carbon trading scheme that was introduced in Europe 5 years ago. Europe's, and I'll keep it really short, England increased their emissions in the first 5 years by about 7%. Estonia and Denmark went up 21%. Finland went up 28%. So they're actually polluting more than they ever had before, if you call it pollution. And billions and billions of dollars just simply went missing. So we are being raped of our money, we've been raped of our vote, we've been raped of any honesty coming out of that stupid house behind us by people that have no respect for us at all. And it has to stop. Sack this government, start again with a decent electoral system is what I say. Thank you.
Well, he can talk all right, can't he? While I've got Malcolm coming over, I just want to share a little statistic that I got from Bruce Bilson. And Bruce is the Shadow Minister for Small Business, Competition Policy and Consumer Affairs. He's also a federal member for Dunkley. And he's an absolutely awesome guy. And he is an